Hello, Dr. Morgan. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Thank you for inviting me to be here with you.
Yeah, of course. I'm so excited to talk to you. I've been a huge admirer of your work for so long. And you are one of the, I guess, like big name holistic vets in the raw feeding community, integrative holistic vet community. And you've been specializing in integrative holistic medicine for 37 years now, correct?
Well, the first 10 years in practice was all traditional medicine, and then I got turned on to doing things a different way and never looked back. So, about 25 plus doing and I will call it integrative because I don't throw traditional medicine out the window. If when you need something, you need something, but we certainly look for a less harmful alternative if at all possible.
Totally love it. So now you're creating all over the interwebs and sharing all this valuable, wonderful information. Take me back to the beginning. When did the shift between sticking with Western medicine to incorporating the best of both worlds of Eastern and Western happen?
Well, I graduated from veterinary school in 1984, so it was about 10 years later I accidentally took a chiropractic course. And I say accidentally because I didn't know that's what I was going to learn. The course was named something else, and then I got there and went, hmm. So since I had paid for it, I stuck it out, and when I started using it, it totally changed my relationship with my patients and things that I was able to treat that I hadn't been able to treat before. So that just sent me on this journey to see what else I could find and what else was available. I just wanted more tools in my toolbox. So I started actually into homeopathy and essential oils and all kinds of different things. And then I took a course in acupuncture, and that was sort of the really huge shift for me. Traditional Chinese medicine became my main focus. And even though I used a lot of acupuncture in my practice, and herbal therapy, my real favorite is food therapy. And so that's really where I have focused. And then in 2013, I wrote my first book, the From Needles to Natural. And it came out in 2014, and I did that really on a whim. Someone in a Facebook group, I was in this small Cavalier King Charles Spaniel Facebook group, and people kept asking questions, and then they figured out that one, I was a veterinarian, and two, my answers were different from what they usually heard. And somebody said, you should write all this down somewhere. And so I said, all right, maybe I'll write a book, and I did. So that became really the big shift from using things on my patients in my practice versus trying to educate a broader audience. And I retired from clinical practice in November of 2020. So my total focus at this point is client education, pet owner education, really trying to empower pet owners and help them navigate the veterinary world because it's not easy.
Yeah, definitely. I can agree with you there. So you've seen both worlds, integrative and conventional. How would you personally, the biggest distinctions between them as being in, having been in both environments?
I think that traditional medicine is really good for acute situations. When you have a major trauma or, something that it just happened, it's huge. Spike to high fever, whatever. And certainly we can use alternatives for that. But if you need a quick fix, drugs can do that. But the long-term chronic healing is really difficult to get with traditional medicine because what we end up doing is not asking the body to heal itself. We keep basically messing with Mother Nature and thinking that we can do things better. So we see that in pet food, we see that with immune suppressants, we see that with a lot of the drugs that are used. And frankly, we're using so many chemicals on our pets now because their immune systems are just trashed from all of the things that we're doing, environmental toxins and the toxins that we put in their food bowl, the toxins that we put on their bodies, and so they don't really stand a chance. So with holistic medicine, I think that it is much better for those chronic conditions where we want to look at things differently and say, let's ask the body if it can heal itself. Let's support it and give it what it needs, to kind of smooth things out rather than constantly thinking we know better.
Yeah, I think that was a great explanation, especially for people just kind of discovering it. Oh, what is this? And sometimes there is a hard distinction of it's not always so black and white. You know, there's some light shades of gray and all different colors in there. This is kind of a side note, but are Cavaliers like your breed? Because I see them everywhere on your website. I know you have them on your books. I know you have them now.
Yes. So years ago, Dobermans were my breed. When I was in high school and vet school, my family had a Doberman, and then my first dog that I got personally was a Doberman. And then my daughter, when she was like a preteen, really wanted a Cavalier. And it's funny, I didn't really know much about Cavaliers at all, but when people would come into the practice I was working in back in the 1980s, and they would say, oh, I want a small dog that would be really loving and friendly. And I don't know why, but I would always say, oh, look for a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, because the nickname for them is love sponges. I mean, they're just sweet. It's very, very rare to meet one that has any aggression at all. And I didn't know that much about them, but I guess my daughter heard me talking about them so much, and so she decided she wanted one. And she managed to rescue one from a really, really bad puppy mill situation near where we lived. And that dog was the best dog. So within a few weeks, I said, well, I'm going to get one of my own, because that one really was hers. And I adopted an English Toy Spaniel, which is similar, but not quite the same. So actually I adopted two, and just the greatest dogs. So my last Doberman, he was a 125-pound dog, a big boy, and he had Wobbler's disease, which is a problem of the vertebrae in the neck. And he was playing with this huge Mastiff, and they were getting too rough, and so I grabbed his collar and pulled him backward, and it paralyzed him.
Oh.
And so here I am, the dog weighs as much as I do, and I've got a paralyzed 125-pound dog. And the good news is, just using acupuncture and chiropractic, I managed to get him up and walking and back to normal within 7 days. So that was awesome. But it was 7 days of trying to move around a 125-pound dog. So I said, you know what? I'm getting too old for this. That'll be my last big dog. I'm going to stick with these little guys. So at one time, the most we had some Cocker Spaniels thrown in there too. The most we had was 13. Right now we're down to 4, 2 English Toys and 2 Cavaliers.
Yeah, they seem like just the perfect, not too small where they're, just jumping around everywhere, but just like, they're scoopable.
They are scoopable and huggable. My smallest one is my puppy. He's about 15 months, and he is only about 10 pounds. He's a tiny little guy. And then the biggest one is probably about 18 pounds. So pretty good size.
Yeah.
So our oldest one lived to 19, and he was in a four-wheeled cart for the last couple years of his life. See, it just had really, really bad arthritis from being a puppy mill breeding dog. So having a 15-pound dog to carry up and down the stairs is a lot better than a 100-pound dog.
Yeah, I see them all sprinkled all over your social medias and videos or your lives, things like that. Now, I don't know if you personally run your social medias, or I know that you're the mastermind behind the content, but personally on the apps, right? But I very admire that you're so, how to put it, like, straightforward on more touchy topics, I guess, on like pet health, vet, nutrition world, which it's hard to do on social media. So that's like...
It is, and over the years, I've gotten just a tiny bit more careful about names, naming names. So a lot of times I'm like, the company that shall not be named. People know what I'm talking about. It's good. But, you have to watch the backlash as well. But I think that people like that I shoot straight, and I'm going to tell you, and the thing is, We get a lot of trolls on our social media, particularly on Facebook, that I am pretty sure they are employees of large pharmaceutical companies and large pet food companies, and they will get in there and they will argue the opposite point until we're all blue in the face and I'm tired of answering their stuff. But and eventually I'll block them because they get really really nasty, and then they just send in another one. But one of the things that does happen is that when they start that argument, it brings more people in. So we've had some posts that 500,000 people are having this conversation, which half of those people, it's never dawned on them that, oh, maybe that chemical my vet told me to feed my dog wasn't so good. So I welcome the back and forth to a certain point, because it does allow people to see both sides. It allows them to see my reply, and I don't always get in there and get in the middle of it, but every once in a while I'll see something that just there's steam coming out my ears, and I'm like, all right, I gotta say something.
And if anything, they're helping the post boost in the algorithm.
Exactly. So it's like, all right, thanks.
Now, you've been in this industry for so long and you've done so much amazing work. What keeps you inspired and keeps you motivated to continue client education and just spreading the word?
At this point, it's my daughter. So we moved, my husband and I and my mom, we all lived in New Jersey, and my daughter was down here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And in January of 2020, my daughter wanted to leave the position that she was in this startup company, and she said, I've got to go get another job. And I said, well, would you like to take over running our online store, the Naturally Healthy Pets? And she's like, oh, that'd be awesome. She's like, I'll be a COO at 26 or whatever. And I said, that's awesome. You call yourself whatever you want. Just take it over. Because my husband and I were maxed out. I was running 2 veterinary clinics, and my parents lived with us. And so it was just too much for us to be able to do everything. So since we moved everything, and then my husband and I, when I retired from practice, we moved to North Carolina as well. And I foolishly said that I was retired. My daughter went, So I am not retired. But she's done such a good job. Like, a lot of the posts with the technical information, she's an engineer. So a lot of the technical stuff, that's her researching, coming up with stuff. She always runs it by me and says, do you believe this study? What do you think about this? So it's been a really, really good matchup, and she pushes me a lot more than I would probably push myself at this point, just because I'm retired. But when I see a topic that makes me mad, I have no problem getting on a rant or making information or blogs or whatever. It angers me when I see our animals being literally killed by the veterinary industry. It really makes me mad.
It's hard, and I think it's so hard for a lot of owners, fresh feeders, people who are looking for that more integrative approach, because there's such a disproportionate supply and demand right now for integrative vets. And whether they don't have access, I know we have online like teledoc communications now, but a lot of people want to go in person, or they're really struggling to thoroughly communicate with their vets on things such as fresh food, titer testing, heartworms, etc. Do you have any advice perhaps on how to bridge that communication, or improving that vet owner relationship, because it is such an important relationship in every pet owner's life?
It is, absolutely. And I mean, right now, there's been a shortage of holistic vets kind of forever. Right now, there's a shortage of even traditional veterinarians, and they say that shortage is going to get worse and worse. And interestingly, I was talking to Karen Becker the other day, and she graduated from vet school. She went to school in Iowa. I went to school in Illinois. And she graduated 10 years after me. And they're having their 25th class reunion or something. And she said she got put in charge of the reunion. And when she looked of the 95, 98 people that graduated in their class, only 40 something are still practicing. Now they're 10 years younger than me. So, 50 years old, as a matter of fact, she told me she's 51. So 50 years old, they've already quit. And, that does not speak well for our profession. So the shortage is not going to get any better because the lifespan for a veterinarian can be very short. People get burned out. Not that many have a 38 years in the clinic career. So I think that is contributing to the problem, even though they are increasing the class sizes and increasing the number of schools available. One of the other things that we're seeing is I'm a baby boomer generation, and it didn't phase us to put in 60, 80, 100 hours a week. That's just what we did. I mean, my kids grew up in my clinic. Now, I think maybe millennials are just smarter than us. I don't know. But they're like, quality of life, not working 24/7 for 35 years.
Right.
So the veterinarians who are working want to have a more normal life, and so they want to work 30 to 35 hours a week, not 80. So literally, we've cut our forces in half. And then we've got corporate medicine that has come in and owns about 35% of the clinics now, probably, and that makes it more difficult as well. So for the pet owner, first of all, just finding a veterinarian that you can work with that is willing to see your pet, that's the biggest hurdle to cross. So my recommendation is if you have one, you make a really good relationship with them. You take gifts for the staff. You take bagels. Like, I had clients that every single time they came in, they brought something for me and for the staff, whether it was donuts, bagels, flowers, whatever, Christmas ornaments. It didn't matter. They always had something in there. And, and we're like, yay, that person's coming in. So you want to be respectful of your veterinarian and their staff as far as their time. You don't want to, so my recommendation is, and we have a download on our website. We called it the curbside check-in because of when people were having to, and some places are still doing that, which just blows me away. But having everything really, really organized before you get there. So have your list of questions. Make sure that you know every single thing you want checked. And I would say you can have a conversation with your veterinarian and say, look, I like to fresh feed my dog. And then when they disagree, you can say, okay, well, and somebody I was interviewing said, a great thing to do is say, look, give me 30 days. I'm going to take my dog off kibble, or my cat, and give me 30 days. And I'll come back here in 30 days, and you can look at the coat, you can look at the muscling, you can look at the teeth, you can do lab work, and you tell me how they look. And, then we can agree to agree or agree to disagree. But it's really about being respectful. Don't back them into a corner, because when they go to veterinary school, they are funded by big pet food and big pharma. And so they don't know any different. They do not. Part of the reason I think they get really upset with the whole fresh feeding movement is they are not taught how to balance a diet from scratch. So they think it's impossible. And they also have this belief that we know exactly what our pets need as far as vitamins, minerals, amino acids. We have no clue. We've got a lot of research, but the AFCO minimums are just minimums. Half their stuff doesn't have maximums. It's the whole thing is really kind of a farce. And if we look at how we eat, we don't put dry cereal in our bowl with all its vitamins and minerals added and eat it twice a day and go, okay, that's good. Don't add any fresh food because that'll kill you. So, it's really a matter of just sometimes saying, okay, we're going to agree to disagree. Now, where it becomes really difficult is when you walk into a veterinary practice and you say, I'm a raw feeder, and they go, you can't come in here. We don't see raw-fed dogs. Like, I had a dog who had to go in. He was having a total ear canal ablation, a cocker that I adopted. Ears were horrible. So I had to take him to the specialty center to have his ear surgery done. And my husband took freeze-dried raw in a little baggie for him because I thought, well, they probably won't complain, and then they don't have to refrigerate it and whatever. All they have to do is add warm water. This will be a piece of cake. Oh, my gosh. You would have thought we set off a nuclear bomb in their office. They
Oof.
immediately, everybody put on caps and gowns and gloves and booty covers, rushed the dog into the isolation unit and said, "Take your baggie of food home." And they said, "Well, you can bring cooked food, but we do not allow raw food in here." I mean, they were so over the top crazy. My husband's standing there trying not to laugh his butt off, and he's texting me, and I'm just like, all right, fine, go home and get something that's cooked. So, sometimes asking them their feelings on raw feeding or gently cooked or fresh food, and then if you get that sort of answer, just clam up. Just like don't back them into. You're not going to change their mind. I guarantee you are not going to change their mind because they've drank the Kool-Aid for too long.
I think overall, as long as you are respectful and are transparent and patient with your vet, no matter what their point of view is, you can build a good, solid relationship because that is something that you are going to need through your dog's lifetime and very valuable to everybody needs in their back pocket.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, it's a matter of being respectful and sometimes just saying, okay, we're gonna have to agree to disagree, but it's okay. I'm fine. I get it. That's your opinion. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I've heard of some people.
What else? It also becomes a big deal with like it's easy to turn down the chemicals. Like say no, I'm not going to use flea and tick chemicals on my dog. That's easy. Like they might give you the song and dance about oh my gosh, he might get Lyme disease or whatever. But you can still say yeah, I got it covered. Don't worry, I never pull ticks off. Whatever your line is on that. The food thing can be a little more challenging, and again sometimes I'm going to agree to disagree on that. And then the vaccine thing becomes an even bigger charged issue because again you have some of these clinics that will not see your pet if it's not up to date on rabies, which the really funny thing with that is oh he's not up to date on rabies and you want to bring him in for an exam. Well, he has to come in for a rabies vaccine first. Okay, but he's still coming in your like it's a little crazy. So, and I would say just stand your ground on the vaccines. I mean, rabies is different. It's a zoonotic disease. It's a bad news deal. But definitely do not get talked into giving it more often than is absolutely necessary. And stand your ground on the other vaccines and really have a conversation about your pet's lifestyle. Because vaccination is not one size fits all. Like the big parvo outbreak that's going around right now, I did a thing on that last week, and everybody has their own little scenario. Well, this is the age of my dog, this is the vaccination status of my dog, this is the titer status of my dog, this is where I live, this is where we walk, this is what other animals he sees. So you really have to have that conversation about your pet's lifestyle. And you may have two pets in the same household who have different lifestyles. You may have one who's out doing scent work, agility work, going to dog shows, and you may have another one that stays home and never goes anywhere. So you really, really have to have that conversation about the lifestyle of the pet. And that's in the From Needles to Natural book. The longest chapter in there is the vaccine chapter. And that's because I took the time to go through every single vaccine and say, this is how it's transmitted. This is how long the vaccine lasts. These are the animals, that, these situations are when you might consider doing it. And this is how often you might consider doing it. So it's really a matter of taking the time to figure out what your individual pet is exposed to.
Yeah, I totally love it. And I know now, I feel like with COVID and after the lockdown, teledoc came really popular. Do you have any input? I personally haven't tried it myself, but I know I've seen a lot of people recommend it. And do you have any idea how that works? Is it easier, harder than going in person?
So, interestingly, the telehealth for the veterinarians is still a huge issue because the AVMA and most state boards tell you that you're not allowed to do it. Now, so let's say you have a veterinary practice that you've been going to, and you're not sure whether you need to have an appointment to bring your pet in, so you do a telehealth consultation with your particular veterinarian in that practice. That is allowed once you have a client-patient relationship with the veterinarian. And I think, first of all, we're in the dark ages with this because telehealth for people has been out there for a very long time. And this is the old way of thinking of everybody protecting their turf. But I think that a lot of times pet owners just need somebody to say, you don't need to panic, or, hey, you better get in the car and go somewhere. And this is what you can do in the meantime. So I think that it can be very helpful. I think it's hard, unless the pet owner is like really, really well versed. Like I can think of a large proportion of my clients that they would call on the phone and give me a description of what's going on with their animal, and then they get in and it's not even in the same ballpark. It's like like I would get a little uncomfortable prescribing something without really being able to lay hands on. So it's hard, but there certainly are some instances where telehealth could save you that trip and could be very valuable. So in my old practice, after I retired, they've just been swamped, and they can't get another veterinarian. Been trying for years to get another veterinarian, and they can't. But their technicians are highly, highly trained. So when I hired my technicians, they were all college graduates. They had all gone to college to be a veterinary technician. We didn't just take somebody in and train them off the street. Everybody had to be highly trained and pass their national boards. So my technicians were really, really good at being able to screen and handle a lot of that telehealth stuff, and then come to me and say, she needs a refill of, this ear medicine or whatever. Got any ideas for what she can do between now and when we can get her in. So it can be very helpful. It's a real gray zone for the powers that be right now as to what they say is legal and what they say is illegal. And what's really weird about that is every once in a while when I'm like scrolling on my computer, I'll see these things come up. Would you like to work for our telehealth? And, it's like, okay, I'm a veterinarian who's never ever seen these animals, and I'm going to get paid to tell people what to do with their animals that I've never seen. And how does this make sense that I'm prescribing things for them? So I do a lot of video consultations for people, but I'm not prescribing medications. I'm talking to them about diet and herbs and lifestyle and how to detox from the chemicals that are causing problems and that sort of thing. So it's really different. So I think it's going to change a lot over the next 10 years. We're going to see this big shift because the manpower is not there. So it'd be interesting to see how it pans out.
Yeah, makes sense. So it's more of a helpful tool versus a complete replacement. Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, do you think there is a clear division between holistic and integrative vets and versus conventionals, or how do you personally perceive it? Because personally, I'm more in the fresh food nutrition part of the world, and then you're in the vet world of it. So what's that environment like?
I've been called a quack by more veterinarians than I care to think about, and most of us who are on a more holistic plane get called names a lot. I don't quite get it, but there's a divide. Some people have some respect for it, but it's are they open-minded or not? For instance, I scream about all these pesticide chemicals that we are feeding our animals, and the traditional vets think I'm crazy. And I'm like, wow, like eating pesticides, that makes perfect sense. Would you feed them to your children? Interestingly, some of those chemicals they are talking about using in people, which very scary.
Dang, I've
very
seen
scary.
some studies it was like the flea and tick ones on dog, but then they had like trace amounts on the children. I think it was like New Zealand or something like that.
Yeah. No, they're actually talking about in countries where malaria is a big deal. There was a study
Oh.
that said if I think it was if 25% of the population ate the pesticide that we are using on the dogs, that would kill off enough of the mosquito population that malaria would drop by like 80%. I'm like, wow, I don't want to be part of the 25%. I just want to be like the other 75% who get the benefit. But, let's think about that for a minute. How many people are we going to kill? Because we've killed a lot of dogs. Um, but if we kill off a huge portion of the mosquito population, let's look at what that does in the environmental food chain. We have birds that survive by eating mosquitoes, bats. If we wipe out the insect population, we're going to wipe out other species. And it just becomes a snowball. So I look at things like that and go, ooh, again, have we thought this through?
Yeah. And even more of a snowball than right now, right? We've already wiped so many species off the earth and global warming and, big pharma and fossil fuels, and the world's already
Glyphosate,
pretty.
and yeah, I mean, it's a mess.
Definitely, definitely. I agree with you there. So there's been a lot we've talked about, and you've had such a wide array of experiences. What's some of the toughest challenges that you've had to overcome?
Ooh, um, avoiding burnout is huge. So it's interesting. I was doing a podcast with somebody. Actually, I think it was Karen Becker a couple weeks ago, and I said, my first 10 years in practice, I was really excited when I graduated. I was so excited to be a veterinarian. It's all I ever wanted to do. And about 5 to 8 years in, I hated my job, hated it with a passion. And I think we see a lot of this, and that's why we have such a shortage. I said if I had to talk about fleas, ticks, heartworms, and vaccines one more time, like every day was more of the same fleas, ticks, heartworms, and animals dying. Like I really love surgery because at least that was something a little bit different. But it was really mundane, really routine. And I remember I was invited to talk to students at a college. And after I gave my talk, the professor came over to me and said, "If you hate your job so much, why do you do it?" And I'm like, "Oh God, did that come across?" Like I was so burned out that it came across in my lecture for these students. I was like, "Yeah, you don't want to do this." So when you get veterinarians who are practicing who are telling students you don't want to do this, it's like, oh. That's not going to help our situation. And we do see a lot of burnout. But luckily for me, I found something else. I found the holistic modalities, and practice suddenly became. And I practiced. After that, I practiced emergency medicine for 10 years. Talk about exciting times. I'll never forget. I had the Sunday shift from 11 to 8, and my busiest day I saw 70 cases. So 9 hours, 70 cases. Half of them needed surgery. I mean, just crazy, crazy, crazy. But if you're an adrenaline junkie, you kind of go, "This is fun." That was before I was into anything really holistic. And then I did other things. I taught at the local college for the technician school. So I kept having to kind of reinvent things to keep it interesting. But being able to do, and then when I started writing books, it's like, oh, well, something else. And now with the educational platform, it's like, oh, something else. So you kind of keep reinventing things. So I think that can be really hard. And one of the things I see for my holistic colleagues, holistic veterinarians are, so all veterinarians, most veterinarians, tend to be really bad at business. Like really bad. And maybe corporate medicine makes a lot of money, but the private practices, the veterinarians are struggling to make payroll every week. I did an interview with Gary Richter a couple of weeks ago. He's a holistic vet on the West Coast, and he said he's still in practice. He said, "I struggle every week to make payroll." And that is so true, so true. Um, and so you don't want to work your whole life and then have nothing to show for it. But unfortunately, I think the holistic veterinarians tend to be even worse at business. So we actually had a Zoom call with one of the holistic groups that I'm in, and there were probably 15 veterinarians on the call, and they were all older. Like, I was one of the younger ones. And they all said, well, I can't retire. I can't afford to retire. Like, and I can't find anybody to take over my practice. So there's nobody coming up behind us, or at least there's not nearly enough that want to be in herbs and chiropractic and acupuncture and food therapy. So we're having a hard time finding people to replace us. We're having a hard time being able to transfer our knowledge over to the next generation. And so, some of these veterinarians, they're 80 years old and they're like, yeah, I'm just going to keep practicing until I die because I can't afford to retire. And that's terrible. That's a horrible way to have to survive. And I think that's one of the reasons that corporate is coming in, and it's so easy for them to swoop in and grab things up, because a lot of people don't want to work for nothing. So, when you see the prices going up at the vet clinic, please understand, like, honest to God, my last couple years in practice, the drug prices were like doubling every year. And, the clients get upset. They're like, well, I've been getting the same prescription, thyroid medicine, whatever. I've been getting the same prescription for years, and you've had 3 price increases in the last year. It's like, yeah. So it's kind of like everything right now, but it's really tough. I mean, health insurance killed us. It's so expensive for the practice, and you have to offer it. You can't not do that. So I would encourage clients, when you're getting mad at your veterinarian because they don't agree with you on what you want to feed, or how you want to vaccinate, or what drugs you do or don't want to use. Also remember that they're probably having a lot of stress in the scenes behind them that they're trying to deal with. So, like I said, be that nice person. Bring them cookies.
Yeah. It's a very enriching career, I feel, but it's not very forgiving with time. And the vet I go to, they recently posted something of just how crazy it is, and if you could do drop off, and we apologize for the price increases, but I mean, COVID, inflation, things like that, and it's so
Supply chain. I mean, it's
yeah.
normal.
Yeah, and I'm hoping with the future generations and the time, and we're constantly changing, it becomes a more healthy environment. But it's so hard with compassion fatigue, late stage capitalism, human giver syndrome, burnout, everything like that it's just so hard on everyone. Everybody experiences a degree to everything that we've talked about, burnout, fatigue, things like that, but it's just so much more concentrated in such an intense, emotionally and mentally and physically too, career choice. So just love your vets, respect them, understand what they're going through.
After being in practice for so many years, I mean, some of my families had been bringing their animals to me for multiple generations. And, so you see the fluffy puppy or kitten when it first comes in, and you're there with it 15, 17 years later when they're taking their last breath. And, I got attached to so many of the clients, so many of the animals, and you have to find a way to protect yourself emotionally. One of my technicians was really bad at protecting herself emotionally, and she would just be hysterical every time an animal would pass, or we'd have to do a euthanasia. And, heaven forbid if we had to do 3 or 4 in one day, because by the end of the day she was just a wreck. And it's like, you have to protect yourself, figure out how that is. So I think that people don't, you come in with your new puppy, you're all excited. It may not dawn on you that the veterinarian just walked out of a room where they had to say goodbye to a patient that they've been treating for 15 years. So, it's switching gears like that can be really hard.
Totally. So just everyone who's listening, think about it from your vet's perspective. Understand what they're going through.
Yeah.
So, with everything that you're doing now, you're speaking, you're educating, you recently retired from your practice. What do you think is the most important lesson that to you that you've learned over this time?
Ooh. I think what I've learned is I'll never retire. Um, I have learned that people will crave knowledge. People love their animals, like they really do. And if I were to say to you, hey, if I can give you a roadmap to keep your dog with you an extra 3 years or your cat, you'd probably say, oh my gosh, I want that. Like, give me that roadmap. And actually, we have that roadmap. We have a couple courses called dog longevity and cat longevity. Um, but you know, we can get more time with our animals, and it's not that it requires. It's almost more doing less than doing more. Like less chemicals, less vaccines, less crap food. You don't have to make your own food. There's so many good pet food companies coming on the market now because they know that people want fresh food. Um, and I think that's part of the problem with the old school veterinary thinking is, for so many years, and this is what I was taught in school. Oh my gosh, no, that food that you put in the bowl, that kibble is complete and balanced. Don't give them any table scraps. You'll ruin the balance. You know, um, I think that because we have so many companies coming on board, and there is such good pet food available now, that's going to make a huge difference. Um, but I think that, I mean, people want their pets to stay with them longer. People, like in my generation now, well, I have my granddaughter who's here a lot, but we pretty much empty nesters, and it's like those animals are the kids now. So my daughter used to make fun of me after she and her brother went off to college, and she's like, "Your dogs have nicer clothes than I ever did. Your dogs have more clothes than I ever did." But everything we did was all about the dogs because that's what we had in the house. So I think people really want the best for their pets. You just have to figure out how to get there.
Yeah, totally. We've had such a beautiful conversation up to this point, and I think we've all learned so much. Lastly, I like to ask all of our special guests if you could give pet parents one piece of advice, what would it be? However you interpret the question.
Man, don't overthink everything. Like, don't make it really difficult. Um, I, it's so funny because people will come to me and say, I want you to, formulate a diet for my dog that is 100% complete and balanced, and, tell me what supplements I need, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, first of all, if I make you one recipe, and then that's the only thing you ever feed your dog, it may be fresh food, which is an improvement, but that's really no different than buying something from the pet food company that is complete and balanced. Like, we don't eat that way. Don't overthink it. Don't be worried about, oh my gosh, was there the exact amount of calcium, phosphorus, manganese, iodine, and zinc in that diet? Like, feed him something today and feed him something different tomorrow, just like you do with yourself. Don't get all caught up, because that's kind of the way of thinking that we've gotten caught up with, the veterinary field and the pet food field, saying, no, you can't vary that. So I would tell people, don't overthink it, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. Like, you may give your pet a medication and they have a bad reaction, or they may get a vaccine and have a bad reaction. Don't beat yourself up, because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know if they're going to have a reaction to something. Just do the best you can, enjoy every day, and just, don't get caught up in so much minutia that you, like, enjoy your time with your pets. So I used to have so many cancer patients that would come in, because that's when people really kind of double down and go, oh, geez, I got to do something different. I'm going to go see that holistic vet. So we see a lot of cancer cases. But I used to have some clients who would come in, and literally in 1 week, their pet would have seen 7 or 8 different specialists. I'm like, wow, do you want to spend your entire, like you are spending your entire life going from one doctor to the next, to the next, to the next. Like, think about it from your pet's perspective. They're being poked, they're being prodded, they're being manipulated, they're probably, they may have pain associated with their cancer. Like, just, I would tell people, you know what? The park is next door. Go take your dog for a walk in the park. I don't want to see you in any veterinary office for at least a week. Like, give your dog a break. So don't get so caught up in, I have to have every single answer. Enjoy your time. Just really enjoy your time with your pet. They're going to get more out of that than going to 7 different doctors.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Judy, for your time and coming on the show and for all your fabulous responses.
Well, thank you.